My name is Chance Cook, and for my multicultural theme kit, I chose Japan as my culture and the Japanese culture. And this is my sturdy container that has all of the activities and books and things dealing with my multicultural theme kit. So the first thing we come to in the kit would be the card giving a little bit of the information about Japan. Japan is an island country on the continent of Asia. They have a population of approximately 127 million, a little bit more than that. And the capital city is Tokyo. And because this unit talks about the exact location using longitude and latitude, on here I have Tokyo is at 35 degrees 42 minutes north and 139 degrees 45 minutes east. The next thing that we will find here in the multicultural theme kit would be the book called The Boy and the 3-Year Nap. The book is written by Diane Snyder and it's illustrated by Alan Say. This book is an excellent book if we are looking at the traditional Japanese landscaping and what the structure of their houses looked like and still look like today. The book itself is about a boy named Taro who is very lazy, who just enjoys sleeping and eating, and that is pretty much all he likes to do. His mother asked him to go and get a job so that he can kind of pull his own weight around the house because they were running out of food at one point, but he scoffs at her and says, I'm never going to do that. So he is very lazy, but he's also very clever, and he comes up with a way so that he can get pretty much everything that he could need or want without having to lift a finger. But his laziness ends up being his demise in the end. The next thing that we come into contact with in the multicultural theme kit is The Bonsai Bear, which happens to be another book that the students will read through. The story is by Bernard Libster, and the illustrations are by Aries Chung. The Bonsai Bear is actually more about Issa, the main character, than it is the bear. Issa is very good at doing a traditional Japanese art which is called bonsai, where they take trees that would normally grow very large, or at least larger than tabletop size, and they cut them in certain ways and they bind them using wire, and they kind of stunt the growth of the trees. And Issa is always looking for a new tree or new plant to bonsai. Eventually, a little bear comes into the lives of Issa and his wife. Issa sees the opportunity to keep the bear himself because the emperor at that time did not allow the people to have wild animals in their homes. So Issa decides that he's going to disguise the bear by making him a bonsai bear and stunting his growth, and then eventually making him look like a cat. The story is kind of about the inner battle that Issa gains or goes throughout this, as whether he is in the right to stunt the growth of a little bear or if he should let it be a natural wild animal. The third book that we have in the theme kit is The Crane Wife, and this was chosen on week 7 when we were given the choice of what resource we would add to the kit. The Crane Wife is almost like a parable, and it is retold by Odds Bodkin, and it's illustrated by Gennady Spirin. And basically, as you go through the story, you get to see traditional Japanese art, as you can see the colors and the way that everything works off of each other. And the story is of a guy named Osamu. And Osamu is a very lonely sail maker. And as Osamu is making sails, he is in his house during a storm, and this crane lands up on his deck, and the crane is very injured. Osamu has a kind heart, and he nurses the crane back to health gradually. Eventually, it gets healthy enough that it flies away, and Osamu doesn't see the crane again. A few days go by, and another great storm is coming out, and a lady is seeking shelter this time. Now, one thing you should know about Osamu is he was very lonely, and up until this point he had been thinking, I would really like to have a wife someone to keep me company, but he was so poor that he was embarrassed to go and ask anyone. So this lady comes to his house, and eventually she stays so long that they end up getting married. Uh, the lady helps Osamu in his sail making, but eventually the sail making is what drives her away. This book is very good for students to read through, and it is pretty much like a parable. Once the students learn the end of the book, they will see the character flaws that Osamu had and why his wife was just very secretive about her sail making. The next activity that we will find in the theme kit would be the art and music activity. And in Japan, there's an instrument known as a koto, which I did not even know about until this project, so I know the students will not know about this. So if we follow this hyperlink, it will take us over to this web page. And on the web page, we can find they have a link for traditional Japanese music, a link to look at the koto, and a virtual koto. We're going to go to look at the koto very first. So there's different kinds of kotos. There's a ryuku, a ryubi, a ji, and a sume. Or sume is actually what they put on their fingers, similar to like when you play a banjo and they strum the strings. But then the students can go and they can see a virtual koto, and they can see what it sounds like whenever it's being played. And that is the art and music activity. The next thing that we find in the theme kit would be the daily Japanese life activities. And I found 3 very good virtual articles and activities that the students can look through to see what life is like from on a day-to-day basis for the Japanese. And I've added 2 pictures. The one is of the bath and one is of the shoes. And as we look at the web pages, you'll understand why. The first web page we come to has the Japanese bath. And different than American baths is in Japan, Japanese families will all share the same water. So they'll draw water one time and then everyone will soak in the bath. And there's a bath etiquette section, and there's a public bath section, and then there's a hot spring section. So as the students go through this, they can learn how bathing is different when they're in Japan than in the United States. The next section that we have here is the removing shoes section. I know where I'm from, people remove their shoes when they go into their homes, but whenever we were at school, we never removed our shoes. So there's a little bit different culture about that in Japan. And I added the shoe rack on the slide because you can see that even at school, students take their shoes off and they have shoe racks. And I just thought that was a neat thing about Japan that is quite a bit different than here in the United States. And the last activity, or the last article we have, is kind of how to survive Japan as a tourist page. And it has different lingo that they use than we would. For instance, a mansion in Japan is just a large apartment building, whereas we think of a mansion as like a building just for one really wealthy family. How their restrooms are different than ours. They have different kinds of toilets, and they have very high technology toilets in some places. Removing shoes and socks, and make sure to watch your head because Japanese tend to be smaller in stature than we do. So if you're over there and you're a taller individual, you may bump your head on some of their ceilings. And those are the 3 activities for Japanese daily life. The final activity that we will find in the Multicultural Theme Kit is the clothing activity, or activities. If students follow these links, they can learn about clothing in Japan and traditional clothing in Japan. But what we find is that traditional clothing in Japan was very similar for both men and women, and it was something called a kimono. and it's still worn today by some people. So I came upon this activity to have paper dolls, and I had a colleague of mine give me an idea that I had not thought of. What I did was I went and I printed out different patterns that are typical of kimonos, but what she suggested to me was to have the sheets of paper for the students to create their own patterns to have on their kimonos. Now the activity itself is very simple, but I would highly recommend, from a teacher's point of view, to have the materials ready for the students before they come to class, because having them create the materials themselves may be very difficult. So what we have here is we have our person, and this person will go about putting on their kimono by first taking their under kimono collar. The collar is there, and we slide it right there, and we always go left over right. And the reason for that is, in Japan, traditionally, left over right means that you're still alive, and if you were at your own funeral, you would find yourself wearing right over left. So as long as you are still alive and not part of the Walking Dead, you're going to have left over right. Next, we have the actual kimono, and we will fold it once and then twice to kind of create a second collar. Now we will slide that under the under kimono collar, and we'll kind of line it up just below so that the collar is still exposed when we fold it over. And now we go left and just crease the top, right and just crease the top, and then we go left again, crease all the way down, and then right and crease all the way down. And then if you happen to have a little tail right there, you just fold that over. So now we have our individual with their kimono, but how's the kimono going to stay on? Well, in Japan they have what's called an obi, and an obi is basically a real thick belt that kind of helps the kimono stop opening up. So we take the obi and we go around right where the creases are, and then we go back under again and fold that over, and we have the obi. And finally, the last piece of the puzzle is the obijimi, and it's basically that part of the outfit that ties everything together. And because we're working with a paper doll and not a real person, in order to keep the obijimi, the obi, the kimono, and the collar all in place, we will just put a piece of tape along the back. And now we have our traditional Japanese paper doll.